Ember.
Oh, Ember.
Miss Ember.
Oh, great, Ember. Tell me what I'm doing.
Hey, Ember, how you doing?
Appreciate you, Ember.
Love Ember. She's great.
We will be yelling at Ember.
Bottom of the barrel Ember bullshit.
Oh my God, Ember.
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 We love you, Ember.
You rock at that, Ember.
We're neighbors, Ember.
Ember is the queen.
What's up, Ember?
I see you, Ember.
I only have eyes for Ember.
Hey, Ember is hot.
Hello, everyone. Happy Tears Day. It's time. It's Viking times again, or something. Because apparently, what you name the days of your year, your month, your all the things, they determine what religion is the true religion. And while it may be that the months are mostly named after numbers, but a few gods, like January after Janus, the days of the week we experience every single day are mostly about the Norse gods, although Saturn got in there somehow. Whatever. In any case, secularism. The ancients did secularism. I know there's this idea that's being promulgated by modern nationalists who favor Christianity, shall we say, that the world is and always has been Christian, and secularism is new and trying to drive out all the good things in society for some nefarious reason. Couldn't be further from the truth. Society has always been secular. That's what makes a society a society. And today we're going to get into the antiquity of how that happened. I mean, it's sort of no-brainer level obvious. You can't have a civilization without secularity. It doesn't work. But we're going to do it anyway. Quick announcement. I got word. Why are words so hard? English is just a bear of a language, I dare say. I'm going to be at NanoCon. I'm going to be presenting a workshop on research for self-advocacy. That's not the actual title. That's just what it's about. And I'm going to be doing it with Godless Engineer. So come to NanoCon and say hi and things. That's July 31st and August 1st. You can get more information at nanocon.rocks. So there. All right. My goodness. We like to think of separation of church and state being invented by guys in powdered wigs. Not so much. Secularism wasn't a modern discovery. It was an ancient idea and an obvious necessity for civilization to function from a time when we had too many gods and not enough peace. If your neighbor worships a cat and your cousin worships a storm cloud and you worship your ancestors, how do you keep from killing each other in the market? Ancient secularism wasn't about disbelieving in gods or any of that stuff. It was about civic neutrality. It was the realization that the law had to be bigger than the altar if the empire wanted to collect taxes. Or, more personally, if I wanted to buy grain from a guy who worships the moon, I had best be respectful to him as a person, despite him being an actual lunatic. Just as I expect him to be respectful of my personhood, despite that maybe I worship the sun, which demonstrably exists. Now, this goes back a very, very long way. It's been practiced by pluralistic civilizations or civilizations as long as there have been civilizations. But we can find specific examples of people encoding this ideology into a hard form that we can analyze. So let's jump back in time a little bit. let's this fella is Protagoras. He's one of the pre-Socratic philosophers of ancient Greece. And he basically told the elite of his era, I can't tell if the gods exist or what they look like. He wasn't out there being an atheist. He was pointing out that humanism is a necessity. If the gods are silent, we have to make the rules ourselves. And that seems to be the case. We have a bit more on him. Let's see. He lived in about the 5th century BCE. He is considered the father of humanism for his focus on human perception over divine authority. His famous maxim, translated into English, is man is the measure of all things. That doesn't mean you should use human lengths for judging the size of football fields or whatever, but that everything we experience, we can only experience through the human experience because we're humans having human experiences. We can't experience it any other way. We can't determine what the hell a god wants because the gods don't seem that inclined to speak up and say so. We can only do what is best for us, or at least best as determined by us. So there's that. So the individual, rather than an objective, absolute, and unknowable reality, has to make the decisions. He coined a phrase, possibly. It's very old writing. He may have gotten it from somewhere else, but he's famous for popularizing a phrase. Homo mensura, the man measures statement. This is an idea that asserts that of all the things, the measure is man. Of the things that are, that they are. And of things that are not, that they are not. And that's interesting because it suggests that knowledge is limited to human experience, making reality relative to the observer. Now, I don't really hold with that. There are things that exist that I am not personally aware of. So reality cannot be relative, right? It's not my reality is different from your reality. But I cannot factor things I'm not aware of into my decisions. And here's the even better thing. To say that the things that exist, and the things that do not, don't. That's a big problem for people who want to claim my God commands everyone should do X, like no shellfish. Well, show us your God. And maybe I'm not saying there's no God. I'm just saying until the God shows himself, I'm going to assume that's just you saying bullshit, because I don't see your God. Where is this? The Greeks, of course, were like, oh, they're up on Mount Olympus. You can't see him because they live in Canada. You don't know them. But we don't have that excuse these days. We've been to the top of Mount Olympus. We've been to the top of the atmosphere. We've been to the fucking moon. No gods to be found. So whatever are we to do? We just have to do it ourselves. So we've got subjectivism. Knowledge and morality are not universal, but context dependent. If something seems true to an individual, then it is true for them. From their point of view, until additional information is brought into their awareness to change that position. That is to say, divine revelation, not a thing. Weird how that works. Agnosticism, in his work on the gods, he wrote, about the gods, I am unable to know whether they exist or do not exist. Which is weird, considering if they're gods, it should be possible to know that they exist. And yet here we are. Nor what they are like in form. This shifted the focus away from theology toward human inquiry. Which, in a way, didn't just kick off humanism, but we have this idea that the Greek philosophy era, which spanned centuries and centuries, was inevitable. But really, it was more like modern science. Today's scientists are making amazing breakthroughs, but they're building on the work of previous scientists. And this is sort of the same thing. Because Protagoras considered that we have to figure shit out ourselves, Plato and Aristotle were able to figure shit out, you know? Like, the fact they existed is because this guy existed. That's sort of why he's the Protagoras. Because truths are subjective, Protagoras emphasized practical knowledge, persuasion, and rhetoric. And what they mean, rhetoric has had a few different meanings over the years. What they mean is in the Greek classical sense, which is to say, making the worst case better. Rhetoric in this situation is arguing for republicanism. For example, taking the worst possible position and trying to make it seem less bad. That's rhetoric. That's what it can do. It's you might call it propaganda, but it's not quite the same thing. It's more persuasiveness than outright misleading. Although there can be some misleading elements, but that's a topic for another time. Actually, that might make a good topic for another time. Rhetoric, the history of rhetoric. I don't know. We'll see. So Protagoras' ideas were significant for placing human perspective at the center of the human experience. Although he faced harsh criticism, ironically, from Plato and Aristotle for undermining the idea of absolute truth and absolute morality. Which is kind of fair, because their whole thing was we ought to be able to reason our way to truer truths. And if that is true, then we ought, again with the oughts, we love our morality arguments, we ought to be able to reason our way eventually with enough data points to work with all the way to an absolute truth. And then Platonius comes along and is like, well, if there is an absolute truth, then whoop, that's what we call God. Which is an argument theists have used ever since. Oh, something caused the Big Bang, you say? That's what we call God. Checkmate, atheists. Ay, ay, ay. Right-handed Sith says, but we do have a goddess right here hosting this stream. Why, thank you. Do feel free to send offerings, because I have tonight, we're doing a bonus show. We made the super chat goal on Sunday's show, which was a blast. It was one of the trans rights shows, and you should absolutely watch it if you haven't. But we made our goal, so we're doing a just chatting stream this evening. We're going to see how it goes. Just chatting. I will just be chatting with y'all. If things are slow, I do have a backup plan. So it's not like it's going to be me staring at the screen waiting for a chat to pop up, but we're going to try it. We're going to see how it goes. I also have a bonus show set up for the next day, one that I've been trying to get set up for a while, but pain and depression and other things have been getting in the way of. But I have a bonus goal for this show, because above and beyond this antiquity stuff, which is fascinating, I alluded to some modern day nationalists trying to undo secularism. And I have a specific video in mind. I have it ready to go, but we're going to need to do overtime to do it. So if we meet our goal, we'll do overtime. We'll dive into that video. And if not, no big, we'll stay on topic. Either way. All right. So continuing on, we do have a lot to get to today. So Protagoras, he wasn't the only person to run along these lines. There were a bunch of people in history. We're not going to get to all of them, of course, but another one who is especially noteworthy, you might say, is this fella. This is Emperor Ashoka. He didn't force everybody in his empire, which was, broadly modern day India, give or take some land and some territory. He codified the Dhamma. I can't pronounce things. I'm very sorry. I'm American. We don't pronounce things. It was a secular ethical code that took into account all religions and called for the protection of all religions. Unlike other empires that may have come before, he didn't allow other people to keep their gods, but there was one official state religion. He made the state secular and guaranteed protection for all religions, which is a neat trick. Now, let me see. I'm using my notes today, folks. That's a reference to yesterday. I completely forgot to look at my notes. I entirely winged yesterday's show. I forgot I had detailed notes. Didn't even look at them the whole time. Why am I like this? All right. The Romans had a thing. It was called the 12 Tables. Now, there's a lot to be said here. So give me a moment while I find my notes on this. Let's see. The Romans created the civic shield. You could believe whatever you wanted to believe as long as you performed your public duties. You followed the rules of the empire. It was sort of a transactional, secularized approach to religion, but there's more to it than that. TLDR, what happened was there was in the days of ancient Rome, you had your patronage system. You had the elites and you had the plebs, the plebeians, the lower class people. And political matters were often decided by elites talking amongst themselves, sort of like today, but they could use the plebs as kind of a scoreboard. Like, I have 10% of the population on my side. Oh, well, I have 15% on my side. That sort of thing. It was almost like a representative democracy, except nobody got elected and everyone was corrupt. Sort of like now in the US. Oh, goodness. But there were social issues. Obviously, much like now. So going way back, let's see, around 450 BCE, this group of dudes called the decimiri. It's 10 dudes. 10 dudes got together and they were appointed to draw up the laws, the tables, right? And they called them tables because they were sort of like actuarial tables. They were to govern actions, crimes, penalties, and so forth. So you would look up like cheated on spouse, divorce plus house. It was a table. You'd like reference the things and you'd find what the law says is a given remedy for a certain thing or a prescribed duty or whatever. Very procedural, very open after a fashion, eventually. So what they did is they came up with these laws. Originally, it was 10 tables. They sent an embassy to Greece to study the legislative system of Athens, which was still functioning at the time, a constitutional representative body, because you may recall Athens was practicing democracy long before this. But they also looked into how the other Greek cities were run. Some of the scholars at the time said that Rome should try to imitate the Greeks. Others suggested that they should try to not imitate the Greek. Whatever, it doesn't matter. In 450 BCE, the second group of 10 dudes got together and they came up with 2 more tables. And it's okay, let's see. Table 1 was the procedure for courts and trials. Table 2 was further enactments on trials, additional rules for how courts do the thing. Specifically, if I recall, the how you retrieve defendants, like if you want to summon someone to face a criminal charge in the court, which was literally a courtyard, like bring them out into the court, That's where that comes from. You'd bring them, you'd send like bailiffs, or what we would call bailiffs anyway. You'd send them out to go collect the person and then bring them back and stand trial. Table 3 was how to execute judgments, which is to say if the judge orders you must pay 50 shekels or whatever they used in Rome, then that was how that was carried out, whether it would be seized from your pocket if you didn't have it, from whatever passed for a bank account. I mean, we know they had money lenders. There must have been something akin to bank accounts, right? But how they got the damages from you, that was also publicly known law anyone could see. And this goes on. There were organization of families, the right of the patriarchs, the legal guardianships, inheritance law, acquisition and possession, which goes to trade law, land rights. Now, this is an important one. Land rights rather than land ownership, because that's a different concept that got introduced later. We may talk about that a different time. Torts, laws about direct personal offenses, like what we might call slander, public laws, Table 10, sacred laws, the laws governing religions. And it governed all religions, regardless of the nature of the religion. For example, today, it's not legal to sacrifice a goat in the middle of Times Square. That's not religious oppression. No religion can do that, But at the same time, religions are guaranteed the right to be able to do their sacred rituals in their sacred spaces. You can do whatever as long as you're not harming anybody, but keep it to yourself. And that seems broadly fair, broadly. And then, of course, the second two tables, the last two tables, 11 and 12, they were the supplements, what we might think of as addendums. But the weird thing about them is it was a lot like what's going on in Congress now. It was add-ons to the existing procedures and rights to make it easier for the oligarchs to stay corrupt and in control of everything. But corrupt assholes got a corrupt asshole. The point is, it was secular and it was public, as you can see in the image here. The powers that be in ancient Rome ordered these tables cast in bronze, although some stories say they were carved into ivory and other various things. Most historians agree they were cast in bronze and put up in the forum so that any citizen could come and read them and see what the law says. So they would know. They couldn't be lied to about it. It was right there in public. So that's pretty neat. What else is pretty neat is Deviant Outcast sent a super chat for 50 secs. Oh my. And says, I'm all for reaching one's goals. I'm also all for community coming together to reach said goals. Community for the win. Hell yeah. We do enjoy that. Yes. I see, let's see. Theo says, is vertical for everybody? Yes, this show is vertical. I don't do the double stream thing because it kills both streams in the algorithm. You have to do one or the other. And I realize some people just do both anyway. I've tested it. It does not go well. So I can either do this show or the bonus shows as verticals, and the other has to be horizontal. So we're going through a testing phase to see if this show works better as vertical, because I really, really need this show to work a lot faster. I had a bit of a moment of panic the other day. 2 days ago, in fact. I had a relatively large bill ping in my pending for my bank account's transactions. And I had $14 in my bank account. I don't like that kind of panic. I need this channel to fucking work much, much better than it does. So we're trying. I'm trying as hard as I fucking can. I'm doing a show every single weekday. I'm doing bonus shows as often as I can. I'm doing my best. If you want to help with that, there's ways aside from direct financial contribution. I understand not everybody can. I myself am in no position to financially help other channels, but there's free options. You can push the buttons. You can subscribe. That does help. But you can also hit the like button. That probably does something. Or the dislike button. That also probably does something. You can comment after the fact. That helps the algorithm show these to people after the fact. Or you can use that share button. Send videos like this to the people who think that secularism is a modern moral corruption. Because it's actually their undermining of secularism that is that thing. But that's always been the position from the regressive right, which isn't the same as conservatism. Conservatives are more Liberal and conservative are kind of in the middle. Liberals are open to new ideas, and conservatives want to conserve what is. And then you've got the regressives who want to go back to how things were, and you've got the progressives who want to actively change stuff. These are 4 groups, and we're pretending there's only 2. You could break it down even finer than that if you really want to. But the important thing is, we're in an age where regressives have the helm, and things are bad for everybody. Stay lovey. Oh, goodness. All right. In any case, yes, use the share button. Send it to the regressives who think secularism is a modern corruption. Please, thank you. Enjoy. All right, continuing on. Also, one thing that will absolutely annoy those red hats and regressives is and would help me out is if you spread the word about my other project and show some pride. In 2024, NASA researcher Rachel Lenz gave the world a flag made from NASA images for Pride Month. On January 20th, 2025, the incoming U.S. administration ordered that Artistic Union of Science and Civil Rights deleted. So I tracked down the original images it was made from, recreated it, and then added even more wonders of the cosmos to update the flag to the current, more inclusive form. On the anniversary of the inauguration, I released it. And it went viral several times. Now you can get a physical copy of that artwork as a full-sized flag or a large sticker, as well as space artworks of the other Pride flags: lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, intersex, ace, and new flags being added all the time. Get one for yourself or give them as gifts and celebrate Pride, celebrate science, celebrate resistance, and help support a creator fighting for human rights for all humans. Head to astralpride.com. Hey. So I'm getting ready to move on to my next thing, and I don't have a visual for my next thing, which is just rude. Like, the fuck? I thought I did. I probably do somewhere. I have so many notes open. Whatever the case. All right. I hate that I'm going to have to agree with Augustine on something here, but he's next. Oh, yes. Even Augustine saw the obvious pro-social benefit of secularity. In fact, he kind of gets credit for coining the phrase. The term secular is his work. The man who inserted so much rhetoric into Christianity, it gave us every terrible apologetic we have today, also gave us secularism. How does this, what is happening? How does this make sense? All right. So Augustine, you know what? Let's just do his history, shall we? Nope, not that one. This one. All right. Why are we way back there? All right, let's go over here. Okay. I'm again, I have many things. All right, this is a biography type thing about Augustine.
Augustine's life. St. Augustine was born in 354 AD in Numidia, in a Roman province in present-day Algeria. His mother was a devout Christian, while his father was an atheist who converted on his deathbed.
Converted on his deathbed. Now, this is an interesting bit of flavor. We don't know those things for sure. I mean, we do know as much as we can know anything, that he was born in Africa. Cool. Algeria, in fact, which, remained under the dominion of Rome, even as Rome continued to wane in power. Not important. The whole, my mother was a Christian, my father was an atheist, converted on his deathbed. We don't have any way to verify that. That's just what the church fathers say kind of thing. Now, living in the 400s, he's not as antiquity as some others, but what he had to say shaped a lot of what was going on. And the reason he said it sheds a lot of light on the things being said about secularism today.
In his book Confessions, Augustine offered an account of his first conscious memory of sin. He recalled sneaking into a neighbor's yard to steal fruit, not because he was hungry, but because it was forbidden. Very naughty.
Now, that's an interesting idea. It was forbidden, but forbidden by who? If he was raised by an atheist, forbidden by who? What makes it a sin? Because in this context, remember, Augustine didn't speak English. Did he mean transgression? What was he transgressing? The law? Was he transgressing common decency? Was he transgressing his own conscience? Or was he later in life trying to make out the case that he had always believed in his heart of hearts and known he was breaking God's laws? The context really matters, but whatever, we can move on.
In his youth, he recounted living a hedonistic life and associating with young men who would boast of their sexual exploits.
Associating with. Wink, wink.
He trained to be a teacher of rhetoric and developed an interest in philosophy at the age of 19 after reading Cicero. He became...
Okay, so yeah, Cicero, we've covered Cicero before on our earlier philosophy episodes, which there's some really, really cool stuff in there. But remember what we just said about rhetoric. It's in classical times, and this is a few centuries removed, so things have started to shift in meaning. But in classical times, it meant to make the worst less bad. So he became a philobro. He started taking the weakest positions he could find and trying to manufacture ways to strengthen them. This is what made him so legendary in Christianity. His suggestions for alterations to the stories, as it were, are where we get a lot of these ideas we have today about how, well, Jesus really did this and Jesus really did that. They weren't in the oral stories being spread around or even the written tales at the time. It's almost like the Bible's been modified over the years or something. Not that we would know anything about that.
Became a Manichaean, a follower of an ancient Persian religion that posited an ancient struggle between good and evil, kind of like the Force in Star Wars with the dark side and the light.
I very much enjoy the idea that St. Augustine of Hippo was a fan of Star Wars. I mean, after all, you may say the films only came out in the 1970s, but they were a modern retelling of a story that happened, as we know from the text itself, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So there's no reason that Augustine couldn't have also known that story, right?
For 10 years, Augustine continued to study and teach rhetoric at a number of different cities in the empire, including Carthage, Rome, and Milan. In Milan, St. Augustine came into contact with Aurelius Ambrosia, famous.
Now, I do want to just note for a second that he taught in Carthage, the city that was wiped off the face of the earth during the Third Punic War. Yet somehow there's a city there for Augustine. Never mind, not important right now. Don't question the Roman version of history. It is without flaw.
For his spectacular speeches. Ambrosia greatly impressed Augustine and encouraged him to become a Christian. Augustine also became influenced by the writings of Neoplatonists, which he would later seek to incorporate into a Christian theology.
And he did. Now, he's not just talking about Neoplatonists. He's talking specifically about Plotinus. Plotinus took Plato's ideas about Platonic metaphysical somethings existing in a dimension, a thought dimension sort of thing. Like Plato's forms would be like the form of a chair. Every chair draws its attributes from this extra dimensional true chair, right? That's what makes things chair-like. Now, when Plato proposed it, he didn't make it clear. It was just a thought experiment, a way to try to understand philosophical concepts. because that should have been fucking obvious, but sadly his students were, as ever, a disappointment. And Platonius took it literally. He was like, oh, there is an actual extra dimension that we can access only by going on a magical journey of reasoning. It's this metaphysical substrate to reality on which all things are built. A wooden chair contains both the properties of chairness and woodenness and probably seatness or whatever. Like, it's incoherent when you try to make it literal, but he tried to make it literal. And then he extrapolated further and further back. He says, okay, so there must be an absolute good from which all goodness derives. And good looks an awful lot like God. So the true God, more so than any of the Olympians or any other God ever proposed, must be the embodiment, the reality of good. The words look similar, so good equals God. There is good in the world, therefore there is an absolute all good God. There's no reason to think so, but that's how he got there. Augustine came across that idea. And based on his experiences with this Jedi religion that he had going on, which may have been Zoroastrianism, or maybe it was something else, who the fuck knows? But he puts these ideas together and he goes, ha! The good must be the light, which must be the one true God. And so he came into Christianity not with an idea that Jesus literally rose from the dead, but with this philosophical concept that there must be one ultimate good from which all other good derives, and that is the real God. And then he grafted Christianity onto that underlying concept. And he built that idea into Christianity, which is how we get these ideas today that are not expressed in the Bible, in either the Old or New Testaments, that God is all good. That comes from Augustine. Prior to his influence, and in fact still in the Bibles today, it very plainly states God doesn't give a fuck about good. He's an envious, rage-filled hate monster who wants to destroy everything that doesn't worship him. He's not all good, and he's never made any pretense to that effect. Ever. That's all Augustine.
In 386 AD, Augustine converted to Christianity after reportedly hearing a child's voice tell him to take up and read, at which point he opened a Bible and read a passage in Romans on how the gospel transforms believers. After Augustine...
Ah, yes, the transformation of believers. If I just believe, I'll be transformed. Mwahaha. Now, that's this man's recounting of an official story that's been passed down and passed down and passed down and was written by biographers who wrote after Augustine's death. We don't know what really caused him to want to convert. Maybe he just went, hey, this religion looks like it'd be really useful for manipulating people, and I can use it to serve my ideal of the good. We can take this religion with so much potential, with already state-sanctioned controls on the populace based on what's in this faith. We can take this and we can install service to the ultimate good. So in a way, just as much as Paul usurped Christianity from Jesus by saying, never mind what Jesus said, we're doing this now, Augustine stole it from Paul. He said, never mind what Paul said. Never mind that God. Call it by whatever name you want, but we're not doing what it said. We're serving the ultimate good now. He appropriated the entire fucking religion. Pirate. I can't even be mad. I mean, I can because of what that religion did, but baller move, I must say. Another baller move is Kelly King, the Detroit Atheist Queen, sends us a super chat for $5 saying, putting toward the goal. Thank you, Kelly. We're making progress. We're now 2/5 of the way to our goal, for lack of a better term. And we'll see what happens. We'll see. It'll be fine. All right. There's a lot more to cover and not all that much time, so I will try to refrain from my ranting and rambling.
Augustine's conversion, he returned home to Africa and was made a priest in Hippo. He was reported to have worked tirelessly in spreading the word of God and converting local people to Christianity. In 313 AD, the Emperor Constantine had issued the Edict of Milan, which proclaimed religious toleration.
Now that's important too. You remember, according to Christian histories, the Christians were persecuted throughout the Roman Empire. Before Constantine made it the state religion, he issued a decree of toleration, saying, stop hunting them for sport, maybe. And in a way, this was a move towards secularism. But we're not there yet.
10 years later, Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. But in Augustine's lifetime, in 410 AD, Christianized Rome was sacked by the Goths, which sent shockwaves across the world.
Right. Like, Rome had been dealing with the peoples beyond the frontier since it started its expansionist, before it was even an empire, right? Like, Caesar became Caesar because he won so many battles against the savages beyond the frontier. They were like, oh, we need to make you dictator because you're pushing things forward. But for Rome itself to fall, no one had any confidence that anywhere was safe anymore. If Rome isn't safe, what is safe? You know, it'd be like for people in the US, if, you know, say the British walked in and just burned down Washington, D.C., for example. Okay, that happened. That specifically happened. And it shook people's faith in whether the government could govern. And here's an interesting thing. As much as modern U.S. citizens like to say, oh, that was way back in 1812, the sacking of Rome happened further from the fall of Rome than the burning of Washington is from the present. Interesting. But details. I digress. I just said I was gonna tangent lesson here. I go tangenting again.
Eternal city had fallen. How could anyone be safe? Why had God allowed his city to be invaded? Perhaps the abandonment of the older gods had been a mistake, and this was them taking their revenge.
That's an interesting take. You change the state religion, and all of a sudden, your capital gets conquered. Oops.
In response to this world-altering event, Augustine wrote two of his most famous works, Confessions and The City of God. He wanted to stabilize the Christian religion at this time of transition and uncertainty, when many were doubting its power and its plausibility.
This is another big change that Augustine had a hand in, as he had built his reputation as a holy man who put the religious life separate from the worldly life. And that's what he did in his book, City of God, which made him incredibly famous for most of history. He tried to separate the church from state authority, which is primarily what kept the church an authority as the state crumbled. Right? Like the ecumenical laws became separate from the state laws, which is how, as Rome literally fell and got overrun, you know, the what became Germany, the Holy Roman Empire, wasn't Roman. They conquered Rome and they held that territory for some time. They lost it eventually, but they kept calling themselves Caesar, or eventually Kaiser. That was the whole thing. But all of Western Rome's territory, that's why it's called the West, it's because it's the descendant states of Western Rome territory. The East just like sealed itself off. Byzantium is like, nope, fuck you guys. We're behind our wall. And they kept going for like 1,000 years. But the West just fucking crumbled. And they were like, oh, well, you know, we can have our own little kings and shit. We need our own little kings and shit in every little kingdom all over the place to keep invaders away, to keep us safe, because Rome can't do it. But they all had to answer to the church. They didn't answer to Rome as a political entity anymore, but they answered to St. Peter's throne. And that's because of Augustine's work, among other things. And that's kind of interesting. I recently read that the fall of Rome for the average person was less a grand declaration that there's a new king in town, and more, one day a bridge would go out and nobody came around to fix it. Because the federal government, if you will, the imperial government, was no longer capable of running the infrastructure. And that just goes to show that the actual function of governments isn't actually to wage wars. It's to maintain the infrastructure, to serve the needs of the people. The military is there to protect the people, not to protect the political power, except insofar as you need the political entity to do the thing that serves the people. I know it's weird, but that's because we live in a weird time where the political power isn't doing that. And this has been a big warning flag for a long time, right? Like in the US, we've been having bridges collapse for a few decades now, and it's getting worse and more frequent. And instead of fixing the infrastructure, we go start wars in the Middle East. Fucking hell. Anyway, I digress again.
He was also concerned with showing how the Catholic Church was superior to and could be reconciled with the principles of Greek philosophy. Augustine worked as the Bishop of Hippo until his death in 430 AD. He died.
That was another thing, and arguably a very important thing in the development of the West, because he was in an age when the empire was literally in free fall. He was like, hold up, the Catholic Church is better than Greek philosophy. So A, we don't actually need Greek philosophy. Let the Eastern Empire keep that. Screw those guys. Which may have been directly responsible for the Dark Age. Because the people were saying, oh, the Bible is more important than Aristotle. Let's burn Aristotle and only do the Bible. Oops. But also, on the flip side, he tried to get Greek philosophy incorporated into the Catholic Church, which to some extent helped. That's why we had a few monasteries that did preserve some of the classical writings all through the Dark Ages. Pluses and minuses, I suppose.
Died on 28th of August during a siege of the city by the Vandals, who were a Germanic tribe. After his death, the Vandals...
Remember, his city is in Algeria. In fucking Algeria. What today is Algeria? It's like a sort of on the border of modern Tunisia. It's like straight south of Rome and slightly west. And his city got attacked and burned by a Germanic tribe. How the fuck did a Germanic tribe get all the way through the Roman Empire to burn a city in Algeria? The empire was in pretty shit shape if they made it all the way to the other end of the empire.
Vandals burned the city, destroying everything, but they left Augustine's cathedral and library untouched in honor of his life's work. Manichaeism. To understand the structure of Augustine's thought, it will be useful to first examine the nature of his beliefs for the first 10 years of his adult life. Throughout his 20s, Augustine was a follower of Manichaeism, a Persian religion which responded to the problem of evil.
Okay, so not Zoroastrianism, not Mithraism, Manichaeism. Cool. Maybe we'll look at that sometime too. Somebody remind me.
In the world by denying that God was all-powerful. Instead, it postulated a duality of powers, of darkness and lightness, in constant tension and conflict embodied in the figures of God and Satan. Augustine's
I'm not familiar with Manichaeism, so I can't say for sure, but I don't think it was an offshoot of Christianity, positing that the darkness and light are God and Satan. I think that's Augustine's reinterpretation. He took these ideas from his pre-existing religion and then incorporated, he stapled Christianity onto it, right? He's saying, oh, he effectively is responsible for making not only God all good, but making Satan all bad. Because as we know from Dr. Kipp and other scholars in the community, Satan was not the embodiment of evil until Christianity invented that idea. Specifically, Augustine invented that idea.
Platonist Christian theology would be a response to this underlying dualism of darkness and light, and it would be an attempt to replace this with a unified framework in which the two realms of spirit on the one hand and substance on the other would be combined and reconciled in a higher unity.
Okay, higher unity. Yeah, cool stuff. But we don't have to, that's not what this show is about. So I need to skip us ahead a bit. But first, Deviant sends us 50 secs. Oh my. And says, come on, folks, we have 20 minutes left to fulfill our goal. I love giving sex, but chafing is a real thing. It sure is. I use baby powder. It helps ever so much. I know that's not what you meant, but this is how I am. I don't know why I am how I am, but this is how I am. Okay, we need to skip ahead a bit. Let me see. Where did I put my image of Augustine? Yeah, we'll go with this one. It's fine. Not that one. Not that one. Okay. I don't need the history of the city of Hippo. Holy shit. Why do I even have that pulled up? So yeah, it was part of the West for a while. After it was conquered, like we were talking about just then, it became the first capital of the Vandal kingdom until they captured Carthage in 439. So like this Germanic tribe had a fucking African empire. It was eventually conquered by Eastern Rome as they picked up the pieces from the fallen West in 534 and was kept under that Roman rule, Byzantine rule, until 698 when the Muslims showed up. And Arabs rebuilt the city. So, yeah. Things did not go so well for the region for a few hundred years. Eventually, the French took it over, which is why Algeria only recently moved from France, and there's sort of like a duality thing. Like citizens from Algeria have right of free passage through France because they're like different nations now, but there's still overlap. It's an interesting situation. But I digress. Hippo was one of the ancient bishopric, which was in the ancient Roman province of Nunindia. I can't pronounce it. I probably can't even read it. I can't tell if it's N-U-M or N-U-R-N because my monitor is very bad, but we're doing our best here. There are still some ancient ruins there. A hospital built by the Little Sisters of the Poor, a basilica dedicated to Saint Augustine. And under Augustine, there were at least 3 monasteries in the diocese besides the Episcopal monastery. They had a bunch of bishops that were very, very famous. We don't have time to get into all of that stuff. But Urban, the guy who eventually, I believe he became Pope Urban, but maybe it was another dude who took his name because he was famous. I'm not a Catholic. I don't know Catholic history super well. I know it shows. Why did I have this page pulled up? I'm not even sure why I had the page pulled up. It's fine. All right, City of God, his famous work. It's a philosophical treatise vindicating Christianity written by Saint Augustine. The actual title in Latin translated to Concerning the City of God Against the Pagans. And it's considered one of the cornerstones of what we now call Western culture. The City of God was written in response to pagan claims that the sack of Rome by barbarians in 410 was one of the consequences of the abolition of pagan worship by Christian emperors. Augustine responded by asserting, to the contrary, that Christianity saved the city from complete destruction. It's not as bad as it could have been if it weren't for Christianity. This is the rhetoric, you see. That's how rhetoric works. At least that flavor of rhetoric. That's not the only way to use rhetoric, but details. Rome's fall was the result of internal moral decay, and we still hear this today in high schools all across the US. Rome fell because they became decadent and corrupt. What? So he outlined his vision for 2 societies, the city of God and the city of man. He wanted the church to be separate from the secular. And by secular, he meant a person's lifetime. That's what that word meant, is the span of human years. And this goes back to Protagoras, that all things that men experience must be in the measure of men. Our cities, our civilizations, our laws, they have to be measured by the impact they have within human lifetimes. So we have the city of God, which is all about eternity and God's great goodly glory and such. And then we have the cities inhabited by humans, governed by human law, not church law. So Augustine, in making the case for Christianity as an enduring and eternal power, was also making the case for secularism by saying that humans need civic laws that are distinct from any religion. And remember, this was in a time when Christianity was not an absolute monolith of culture the way it is in modern Europe. Well, modern Europe 100 years ago, perhaps. But I digress. There were pagans. There were other religions. There were a whole bunch of different groups running around believing different things, not just the ancient Greek and Roman gods, but the Norse gods, the heathenistic gods, which are basically also the Norse gods, the Celtic gods. There's so many groups of gods all over the place. The Africans had their own gods, so many different kinds, etc., etc., etc. And so he understood that without an absolute state authority enforcing church law, and in fact, that would be undesirable, linking the power of the church to the state, because when the state fell, and this is the key point, when the state fell, if the church were linked to it, the church would fall too. So having the church be aloof from the state rendered it invulnerable to the fall of the state, which he saw coming. But by protecting the church from the state, he protected the state from the church. It has to go both ways. That wall has to exist in both directions, or it doesn't work for its intended purpose of protecting the church from the things that happen in human lifetimes. Fascinating, isn't it? So he set the groundwork. He's saying Christians should be allowed in Arabic cities, eventually Muslim cities, or the Persian cities where he learned his Manichaeism as a child, or the pagan cities of the north. All people should be allowed in all the cities because the cities should be apart from the dominant of religion in the area. The fucker invented secularism, at least as we understand it today. Possibly accidentally, possibly as an unintended consequence of trying to protect his church from the political volatility that was happening in his lifetime. But he still did it. And that's pretty fucking neat. All right, let me get back to my notes here. So, there's this idea that public squares were filled with monuments to the gods, but that's never really been true. If we go back to the oldest cities that we, still have some bits and pieces from, we'll see monuments where the laws are written down in tribute to the gods. They mention the gods. They invoke the gods. Behold, I am the great ruler fulfilling my divinely ordained duty. But they're ultimately about the great ruler. The ruler invokes the gods for his own earthly power, but it's really about him. And in Rome, these 12 tables that we talked about earlier, those don't expressly mention gods either. Those are monuments of an increasingly secular society, and arguably the seeds of what would become secular law, which in turn perhaps had something to do with what Augustine stumbled into over the ages. So we didn't go from the god to the state to the idea. We went from the ruler to the state to the people. We became more secular over time, But the seeds have always been there as long as there's been civilization, because once again, you cannot trade grain with someone if you murder him because of what he believes in. You have to be willing to set things aside. You have to be willing to say, I see you are a person regardless of what you believe, and I hope you see the same thing about me. And I can't imagine how this could possibly have any bearing on things going on in the world today. How maybe we should be able to see each other as people and not just personifications of an enemy belief. So, just as the Roman Forum forced different cultures to walk the same pavement, today we have the internet, which forces us to share the same digital space. Secularism is effectively the terms of service that keeps a civilization running. And we've always known that, because that's how you have a civilization. It's just been a little more formalized over the years. So we think we're more secular today. And to some extent, that's true. We formalized these ideas. We're better able to communicate the concepts underpinning them. But the ancient world was considerably more pluralistic than some parts of our societies today. And they were a lot more comfortable with different flavors of humanity than we see in the present. So secularism didn't emerge because people stopped believing. It emerged because people started trading. Once you need to sell grain to someone with a different god, you find a secular middle ground really damn fast. Diversity didn't follow secularism. Secularism was the result of diversity. And that is our break point, friends, folks, fam. We didn't actually meet the goal today, alas, although I do appreciate everybody who tried. Perhaps we'll get to the video the bonus content video some other time, but we do have a bonus show tonight. We're trying out a Let's Chat stream. So join me this afternoon if you feel so inclined. It should be interesting, and I promise that one will be horizontal. Thank you all so much for joining. I appreciate all of y'all and what we're trying to do here. The rest of this week is going to be continuing secularism, humanism, and the march of progress through history. So I hope you join us for that. And as always, try not to die. Thanks to all our patrons and top-level members for February. Miranda, Karen Butcher, Jimmy Tux, Ian Chen, Maya Adkison, Jessica the Transmetal Alchemist, Robin Webster, Lilith, Ember Lynn, The Barely Bearable Atheist, Eric Wander, Jason Jacoby, Lilibal Trades, Deviant Outcast, Secular Feelinist, Kelly King, the Detroit Atheist Queen, Geo Sam, Thriver Scapegoat, The Godless Engineer, Why? Because Weed Bro, Katie Bluebird, and Fro from Norway. And you can add your name here next month by signing up at patreon.com/betterthanember or by joining Emberships here on YouTube at the Cinder level, which also includes all the custom emojis, tons of member-exclusive content, member-only live streams, and a bunch of other stuff. I deeply appreciate all the supporters who keep this channel going. Thank you so much. Because of you, we're building a wonderful community that I'm very proud of.